So the question for all of us is not the road we've traveled for the last 100 years. The question is, what are the next 100 years going to look like? Where are we going? And let me tell you a few things that I've learned for sure in the last few years. There will be no separate peace between Israel and the Arab world. I want to make that very clear to all of you. I've heard several prominent politicians in Israel sometimes saying, well, the Arab world's in a different place now. We just have to reach out to them and we can work some things with the Arab world and we'll deal with the Palestinians. No, 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 and no. I can tell you that reaffirmed even in the last week as I have talked to leaders of the Arab community. There will be no advance and separate peace with the Arab world without the Palestinian process and Palestinian peace. Everybody needs to understand that. That is a hard reality.
Welcome to the Rosenberg Report. That, of course, was former Secretary of State John Kerry. He was speaking in Washington just a month after President Trump was elected in 2016, already declaring that anything that Trump wanted to do in terms of Middle East peace was dead on arrival, saying 4 times, you saw it, 4 times, that President Trump could never make peace between Israel and any Arab countries unless he made peace with the Palestinians first, saying no, 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 4 times, right? My next guest is the person that helped set into motion President Trump getting 4 yeses, the historic Abraham Accords, after first doing an amazing deal of the century. That's how it got dubbed by President el-Sisi of Egypt. But my guest is one of the top Middle East advisors in the Trump administration. Jason Greenblatt, welcome to Jerusalem, welcome to TBN, and it's such an honor to see you. You've become a friend, and you really are an amazing insider in what has happened in the transformation of this region from just war, terror, genocide, religious persecution to a new era of Arab-Israeli peacemaking. First of all, welcome to Jerusalem. It's good to see you.
It's great to be here. I'm honored, and what a location.
You could do worse, right?
So
how does every television network not have a location like this?
Absolutely. And I think back to what John Kerry said and did just before we came into office. Yeah. If you remember, there were the 3 Khartoum no's, right?
Right.
No recognition of Israel, no negotiation with Israel, no peace with Israel. Right. He decides to add a 4th no. Coincidentally, you're right, President Trump achieved 4 peace deals. It was, there was such an arrogance about that statement and how wrong he turned out to be.
He did. And there's so much I want to cover with you on the show. And then we're going to do an extended version on our podcast and on All Israel News. We're going to show the whole interview. And I want to get, there's so much I want to talk to you about. But let's start with there, just very briefly. What was the single most important factor in President Trump and your entire team getting to 4 yeses?
I think the core is the unique nature of President Trump. There are people that love him. There are people that I'll say don't love him.
Okay,
a different kind of president. He wasn't afraid to break China. I don't mean China the country. I don't want to get into trouble. Okay. Wasn't afraid to break China.
One topic at a time.
All right. He wasn't afraid to say, figure it out. Something has to change. Don't be afraid to try new ways. He earned the trust of the region, the entire region. When we came into the region, the people felt betrayed by the prior administration. And he
because of the Iran deal, tilting all of U.S. policy towards our worst enemies, and basically throwing or feeling the feeling that Israel and the Arab world was thrown under the bus in secret negotiations to give $150 billion to our worst enemies.
That's right, and you hit the nail on the head. Everyone always speaks about how Israel is threatened by Iran, and of course it is. I should say the Iranian regime. Of course it is. Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map. But you know what they want to do next? They want to attack the rest of the region. They want to move into all these beautiful cities built in the Gulf, that are being built in the Gulf. Then, of course, they want to attack Iran. And President Trump understood that, and the region saw in him somebody who understood them and who wanted to protect them.
When I interviewed my friend, Vice President Mike Pence at the White House the day of the amazing Abraham Accords signing, I interviewed him immediately after his lunch with the president, with Netanyahu and the other leaders, and he said we threw out the old playbook. Then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told me for my book, Enemies and Allies, we flipped the script. in a sense, what you're saying, new thinking. You just threw out the conventional John Kerry way that had been done, which meant that there hadn't been peace for, a generation, almost 25 years at that point. You guys decided, well, why do it the exact same way?
100%. I'm a fan of both Mikes. They really know the region. They know their stuff. And those are great answers to your first question, which is what's the way we did it? And the way we did it is how they answered it. But we had to earn the trust of the leadership. And the way we earned the trust of the leadership was the unique thinking and backing of President Trump.
During your tenure for President Trump on the Middle East, crisscrossing this region, going to countries maybe I would guess that you never imagined going into, being feted at the highest possible levels. And that gave you a perspective that attitudes in the Arab world towards Israel have changed dramatically. First, talk about what you were picking up on the listening tour that you were doing, if I can use that term. What were you hearing? What were you seeing as America's top diplomat on this negotiations on this pathway that you reported back to the president that seemed different to you than any other time in this region's history?
Well, it was really going back to the John Kerry quote, completely the opposite of what he said. Yes, it's true. Maybe at the first meeting or so, some of these leaders in the region were saying, Israel. They whispered it. They didn't say Zionist regime or any of the nonsense that used to be used decades ago. Zionist entity.
If they hate us.
They were honest about Israel. They understood Israel's importance. They understood they're all sort of in the same boat, all trying to make a positive impact on the world, all trying to bring their societies to a completely new place, understanding where oil has its role and where oil may not have its role in the future. And we were picking up on these green shoots of a desire to have a relationship with Israel. How far it would go, we didn't know. In fact, by the time I left the White House, we weren't sure if there would ever be something like the Abraham Accords. But there was a dramatic shift in the region in terms of the attitude to Israel, in terms of supporting the Palestinian people, frustration with the Palestinian leadership, but at the same time recognizing that the Palestinian leadership should not have a veto right over peace and prosperity in the region. It took a long time, and some of the early wins that we saw, we thought were amazing, and in retrospect, they seemed small. Israeli Israeli athletes participating in the region,
right.
The Israeli national anthem being sung in the region at sporting events,
right.
An economic conference led by Jared Kushner in the region to help the Palestinians, in Bahrain, getting Israeli journalists to that conference.
Right.
Each of those was, wow. And now you have Israelis all over the place over there. It's really quite remarkable.
Coming up, how are Israel and her Arab partners benefiting from the Abraham Accords? And is it likely that Saudi Arabia will soon join the circle of peace? Joel Rosenberg continues his conversation with former Trump Middle East envoy Jason Greenblatt after the break.
Welcome back to the Rosenberg Report. We're here in beautiful Jerusalem. A gorgeous day, given that we are in winter here in Israel, but it wouldn't look like it today. It's a little chilly, but I'm here with Jason Greenblatt. So you've written a book, In the Path of Abraham, how Donald Trump made peace in the Middle East and how to stop Joe Biden from unmaking it. Now, this came out in the summer of 2022. I loved this book so much that we made it the All Israel News Book Club Pick of the Month.
So there's two parts to the title. There's the Abraham and the Path, and I'll address both of them. Abraham is the forefather of the three major world religions. We understand that this beautiful city, the land of Israel, is so important to the major three faiths. When I come here and I pray at the Western Wall, and I see all sorts of people walking around. I go to the malls, I see Jews, Muslims, Christians, everybody walking around. It's an amazing city, and Abraham started it all. The second aspect to the title, though, is the word path. People, sometimes say, oh, the Abraham Accords failed. They pick out a couple of scenes at the World Cup, for example, in Doha, where there was some tension between Israeli journalists and some Arabs or whoever they were walking around. What they don't understand is we are on a path. Yeah. Yes, President Trump achieved historical things together with the courageous leaders who signed the Abraham Accords and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I could say that because he's now Prime Minister again. Yeah. But it's a long, complicated path, and it's going to hit stumbling blocks.
I highly commend the book to you because it really does take people behind the curtain. You get to see both the Wizard and the City of Oz and all the cities in the region. So now, from your vantage point, both as a diplomat but also in the world of private equity and venture capital, what are you seeing in terms that Christian investors, Christian business people, and all people, Americans who are investors, what should they know that you know and that you're seeing?
What investors should understand is these countries have visions. Saudi Arabia is one, not an Abraham Accords signing country
Not yet. Right,
exactly.
yeah. I hope.
Inshallah.
Baruch Hashem.
They have this Vision 2030 that I heard about from the Crown Prince, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, in 2017, and throughout my time at the White House. And the first couple of times he was explaining it, I was like, really? Really? Wow. But I've been to the kingdom so many times since 2017.
You were just there.
I was just there. I'm going back again twice in January.
Okay.
The progress, society-wise, women driving, women playing roles in government, but the building that's going on, it's really remarkable. People ought to pay attention there. Are the projects hugely ambitious? Do they sound fantastical? Yes, but they're moving forward with it, and people should explore it. And it's not just Saudi Arabia. Each of these countries has their own vision. Abu Dhabi is now, part of the UAE has this major ad campaign on CNN called Thrive, enticing people to move there, live there. These countries are beautiful. They're safe. They're in an upward swing, like I could say about not so many countries around the world. They're open. They're tolerant. Do they have a long way to go, some of them? Yes, no question. But I'm excited about it. People should go there, explore it, do your due diligence, make sure you get, like anywhere, the right partners.
Right.
There's tremendous opportunity there.
It's really amazing. Now, in terms of Israeli trade and with these Arab countries, clearly it's going up country by country. It's really been fascinating to watch these numbers grow. Most of the tourism, however, has been Israel to the Gulf countries. We haven't really seen yet Emiratis, Bahrainis, Moroccans coming here quite as much. But in terms of investment, I want to get your sense of it. It feels like Israeli companies are sort of hoping for, and understandably so, Gulf money to come here. Are we seeing Israeli and American investment going inbound into the UAE, Bahrain, and of course Saudi Arabia as they do this dramatic economic change from being primarily based on oil to a highly diversified economy?
I think Israelis made the mistake initially of thinking that Gulf money is just going to pour into Israel. The Gulf money is very smart money, and they have lots of places to invest. And yes, they're interested in Israel, but they're interested in Israel just like they're interested in any good investment anywhere around the world. And I think Israelis have figured that out. First they went there in droves thinking the money's just on the street to be picked up. It's not true. The Emiratis need to learn who you are, trust you, figure out which the right investment is.
There's a lot of coffee and baklava that has to be had.
A lot of it. It's a very different culture, right? They're similar in so many ways, but Israelis are very quick. Emiratis and the rest of the society there generally really want to understand who you are. They want to learn you. They have to trust you. They have to know who they're dealing with. Israeli money into the region is slowly happening. I think much more should happen. I'm hoping it becomes a two-way street because that's the only way things will really succeed. American money, slowly. There's no question the region wants American, Israeli, and other money to flow in, and they have the projects for that money to flow in. People should stop looking at the Gulf, in my opinion, as an ATM. Yes, there's crazy amounts of money, but if you only look at the Gulf as an ATM, you're not likely to do a lot of business. You really need to look at it as a two-way street, and everybody wins.
Let's back up for a moment. You're an Orthodox Jew. I'm an evangelical I am a Rosenberg. My dad was born and raised in Brooklyn. His family escaped as Orthodox Jews out of Russia, out of Minsk, back in the pogroms. So you and I come at the world theologically differently, at least on who Jesus is. But in many ways, you and I have come to find that we have such similar viewpoints. And I want to start with you and I just meeting. Why don't you share that story? But it was right here in Jerusalem when we first literally ran into each other.
Yeah, I'll go back before we met.
Okay.
Because I have a lot of great stories from the White House. This is one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of your work.
Thanks.
I was reading a story, one of your books, I can't remember which, and the story, the chapter that I was up to, I remember picking up my daughter from class and saying, honey, you gotta listen to this chapter. And
You were listening on Audible, right?
on Audible,
Yeah.
and it was a story about how King Abdullah was hosting a peace conference at the palace in Amman with
The third target. That was
Okay,
yep.
the Prime Minister of Israel, President Mahmoud Abbas.
Right.
I won't give away what happens. Very exciting.
It doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well. And then a few months later, I find myself here, first one day in Jerusalem and then going to Ramallah. King Abdullah sends his helicopter to bring me to Amman, and I'm meeting him. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, how did it happen that I was this ordinary guy reading this book? Never in a million years would I have imagined being here. And then a few days later, I'm at the King David Hotel, that storied hotel here in Jerusalem. And somebody comes up to me on the patio and says, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine. He's a great author. I said, who's that? Joel Rosenberg. Joel Rosenberg, wow. And that's how we became friends.
It is crazy. You know, so I'm a failed political consultant. Everyone I ever worked for lost. Even when I was on Bibi Netanyahu's comeback campaign team 22 years ago, it took him 9 years to come back, and I played no role. So I went into fiction writing, but it's interesting to create a scenario, and that's one of the reasons I've enjoyed. One of many reasons of meeting you. But yeah, you write a scenario, a set of novels about how peace could be negotiated and who the players are and what kind of bad guys would come out of the woodwork to try to throw sand in or actually blow up, literally or figuratively, a peace negotiation. And then somebody who is a reader of the novels ends up becoming the chief, Middle East negotiator for the president of the United States. That's a crazy scenario. But Pence has become a reader of my novels before becoming VP, and Pompeo, and it is interesting how fiction can play a role in at least entertaining, but also advancing ideas.
It educates people.
Yeah, it educates people.
Coming up on the Rosenberg Report, can Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu forge an historic peace deal with the Saudis as he vowed to do if elected? Former Trump envoy Jason Greenblatt reveals his exclusive insight right here on TBN.
Welcome back to the Rosenberg Report right here in Jerusalem. So happy to have my exclusive guest today, Jason Greenblatt, the top Middle East negotiator during the Trump administration years. It is astonishing to me that the two men who were critical elements in bringing the Abraham Accords about, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, were almost immediately voted out of office. Now, those were for different reasons, but it was astonishing, really. They didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize. Apparently, making peace for the first time in a generation with 4 Arab countries, 5 Muslim countries, that doesn't qualify anymore.
Not good enough
for those in Europe. But now you have a situation where Netanyahu is back, and Netanyahu is saying that one of his top priorities is making peace with Saudi Arabia. Do you think that's possible? You and I are some of the few people in the world, much less Jewish people, that have ever actually sat for hours with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
So first of all, Prime Minister Netanyahu does not get the credit he deserves for starting us on the path to Abraham. I think Israel's lucky because he will be a good steward, if not to reach an Abraham Accords with some of the other countries, perhaps Saudi Arabia, to begin to strengthen those ties. But none of it will happen without, of course, the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Let's discuss what Saudi has done. So when President Trump released the Peace to Prosperity plan between Israel and the Palestinians, which ultimately failed, Saudi issued a phenomenal statement. They didn't go back to the decades-old talking points that the Palestinians and the Europeans and others use. They were positive comments. When the Abraham Accords were signed, Saudi opened up air corridors between Israel and Bahrain and Israel and the UAE. This past summer, July 2022, they opened up all the airspace to all countries, including Israel, right? Step by step, they're making these important steps. And I think we need to, first of all, recognize that, be grateful for what they're doing, and give them the time and space they need to move in that direction. I think they're heading in that direction. Anything can change. The Abraham Accords happened suddenly, even though it's years in the making, but it just takes something to let that last puzzle piece click into place.
Jason Greenblatt, thank you so much for taking this time to walk through some of these critical issues, the business and investment opportunities coming in this region, the extraordinary work that God let you do. You know, you were chosen for such a time as this. I think of the book of Esther, Esther and Mordecai getting in key positions to play a role in protecting the Jewish people. And you really did that. In many ways, God let you play a role in building out an Arab-Israeli peace that I think will endure for some time and is a great answer to the prayers of millions of Jews and Christians praying for the peace of this beautiful, historic capital of Israel, the city of Jerusalem. Thank you for the role that you played, and thank you for spending time on TBN, on the Rosenberg Report, to talk to me about these things.
Well, I was very blessed. Our whole team was very blessed to be able to do it. And thank you so much for the time to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to do it in front of such an amazing backdrop.